HOA Karen fines Black young man $500 for hanging an American flag and the unexpected outcome. Hello everyone, and thank you for visiting the HOA Karen Files channel. Today, we will explore a story full of hidden truths and injustices, a story not just about power or neighborhood regulations. This is the story of Karen, a Homeowners Association, HOA, president who seems to have power in her hands, but hides actions of racial discrimination, smuggling, and abusing her power to manipulate the community around her. In this story, Malik, a Black former firefighter, faces unreasonable demands, unjust fines, and a power system Karen created to strip innocent residents of their rights. But behind this battle, it's not just about Malik protecting his home. It's a fight for justice, equality, and mutual respect in a challenging society. This story goes beyond racial discrimination and expands to big questions about the abuse of power and how we can stand up when facing ruthless forces in society. With the help of a private investigator, the dark secrets about Karen are gradually revealed, from perfume smuggling to shady real estate deals. So, what happens when justice is served? Follow this surprising and intense story until the very last moment. You won't want to miss any of the twists. And we would love to hear your thoughts and opinions about this story. Leave a comment below this video. What do you think of Karen's actions? How can we prevent such behavior in society? This story may open up big discussions, and we look forward to hearing your perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the exciting and meaningful stories coming up. Watch this story to the end, and let's dive into the legal, political, and human consequences of Malik and Karen's tale. My name is Malik, 32 years old. My father is American, and my mother is Jamaican. After 10 years serving as a firefighter in Chicago, I decided to leave my job and find a new direction. The reason is simple but profound. Firefighting took away too much of my time and energy. I felt I needed to find a quiet space where I could rebuild myself and start over. In July 2024, I decided to move to Sunville, a peaceful neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, hoping to rebuild my life. Sunville wasn't where I planned to stay long-term, but I thought it was a place where I could start a new chapter, free from the stress of my former job. With the savings from my years as a firefighter, I bought a small house worth $350,000, hoping the quiet surroundings would give me the motivation to change my life. When I first moved in, everything seemed to go smoothly. The neighbors here were all very friendly, enthusiastically helping me move in and inviting me to join community activities. Outdoor parties and HOA meetings were held regularly, and I felt like I was truly part of a community. At that time, I thought my new life would be a fresh, uncomplicated, and peaceful start. However, things began to change when I met Karen, the president of the HOA. Karen was someone you wouldn't easily forget. From the first time I met her, I felt something was off. The other neighbors were all very friendly and approachable, but Karen was different. She seemed stern, always ready to criticize anything she thought was inappropriate. At first, I didn't think much of it. I thought maybe she was just someone who took her job seriously. One morning, while I was tending to the lawn in front of my house, Karen appeared. She walked out of her large house, her crisp white blouse pressed neatly, and her high heels made a distinct sound on the pavement. She stopped right in front of me, and I could feel her attention fixed on me. "Hello, I'm Karen, the HOA president. And you are?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with an unsettling suspicion. "I'm Malik, just moved in here. Thanks for welcoming me." I smiled lightly, trying to maintain a friendly tone, though I could sense something was wrong in the air. Karen stared at me for a moment, then softly spoke. "Oh, I remember you now. You're the new guy, right? I must say, this is quite a special neighborhood. We're very particular about maintaining the value of the community. And the HOA regulations, we're very strict about making sure everything is appropriate." Her words, though soft, carried a sharp undertone, as if she was implying something that I couldn't immediately understand. Appropriate. That was the term she used so often, as though I were part of something that didn't quite fit into the perfect picture she was creating. "Oh, I understand," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I respect the regulations here." Karen nodded, but her gaze never left me. An awkward silence enveloped the conversation. "You're the only Black person in this neighborhood, aren't you?" Karen suddenly asked, which caught me off guard. Her question seemed to be thrown out casually, but I felt it was a deliberate observation. I just smiled lightly, trying not to let my emotions show. Yes, that's right. But I believe this neighborhood can be a wonderful place for everyone, regardless of race or background. Karen looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing my words. Right, right, she said, her tone seeming more cautious. Just remember that everything here has to adhere to the standards we've set. And I hope you won't have any trouble adjusting to everything around here. I was sure I had picked up the deeper meaning in her words. Everything around here. Was she implying me, the only black person in this neighborhood? The discomfort began to rise in me, but I just nodded and replied, "Thank you for the reminder. I will be mindful." Karen turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling as though I had just been judged in a strange way. She didn't say anything more, just walked off, and I realized that the peaceful life I had sought might not be as easy as I had hoped. After a few weeks living in Sunville, I began to settle into the rhythm of the neighborhood. On weekends, I often spent time improving the small garden in front of my house, creating a cozy space that suited my tastes. One beautiful morning, I decided to hang an American flag on my front door, a simple act, but one full of meaning to me. The American flag was not only a symbol of the country I loved, but also a way to express my pride in the place I lived. I thought it was something a regular citizen would do. Little did I know, that simple act would lead to a complicated issue. The very next day, I received a letter from the HOA, signed by Karen. Contrary to the friendliness I had expected from the neighborhood, the letter felt like a cold splash of water. It stated that I had violated one of the HOA regulations. Specifically, I had disrupted the aesthetic of the neighborhood by hanging an American flag on my door. They required me to take the flag down within 48 hours and, as a penalty, I was fined $500 for violating the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. I was stunned when I read the letter. $500? For a flag? I couldn't understand why such a simple act could be considered disruptive. My initial reaction wasn't anger, but surprise and disbelief. How could a flag cause such controversy? I couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right. How could there be a rule about hanging flags when other decorations were freely displayed in the neighborhood without any complaints? The first question that popped into my head was, could the fact that I was the only black person in the neighborhood be the reason Karen reacted so strongly? Karen looked at me sharply, as if she was guessing what I would say next. I understand, but rules are rules. If you disagree, I will have to continue enforcing them. The conversation ended quickly. I walked away feeling powerless, unable to change anything. The feeling I had at that moment was hard to describe. Part of me felt I couldn't endure this injustice any longer, but another part held on to the belief that the only choice was to continue being patient. This feeling wasn't just anger at being fined for such a ridiculous reason. It was the first moment I truly realized that the racial discrimination I had heard about could exist even in neighborhoods that seemed safe and peaceful. After the incident with the American flag, I thought everything would calm down and I could continue living peacefully in Sunville. But I was wrong. Karen didn't stop there. The following week, I received another letter from Karen, this time about a serious issue she felt needed immediate resolution. It was about the gate at my house. She wrote that my gate didn't fit the style of the neighborhood and demanded I replace it within 30 days, or I would be fined $1,000. The reason Karen gave was absurd. Your gate looks too simple and lacks sophistication. I was stunned when I read those words. My gate wasn't anything special. It was just a black metal gate, sturdy and aesthetically simple, with no issues at all. It looked exactly like the gates in the rest of the neighborhood. I distinctly remember when I chose this gate. I had consulted a few neighbors, and none of them complained about it. Yet Karen thought my gate was not elegant enough and demanded that I replace it. I couldn't help but feel that every action she took was aimed at me. Karen wasn't just finding reasons to make things difficult for me. She was also trying to assert her power in the neighborhood. Each time I received unreasonable demands from Karen, I felt the injustice grow more and more apparent. Was she trying to force me out of this neighborhood? I couldn't help but wonder. It wasn't just about the unreasonable HOA rules anymore, but also about her relentless effort to impose standards that I felt were completely foreign and unjust. A week later, I decided to confront Karen, not to apologize or explain, but to face her directly. I knew I couldn't continue living in constant fear of inspections and unreasonable demands. When I entered Karen's house, She was sitting in the living room, still wearing her thin glasses, and the light shining on her face made her look even colder. She stared at me indifferently, but I knew right away that I could no longer avoid this. "Hello, Karen," I began, trying to keep my voice calm. "I want to talk about the request to replace my gate. I don't understand why it's an issue when it looks exactly like the gates of other houses in this neighborhood." Karen took a deep breath, placed her notebook down on the table, and responded with an emotionless tone. "Malik, I've explained this. The HOA rules are that everything must fit the neighborhood style, and your gate doesn't fit. This isn't a personal matter, but a community-wide issue." I couldn't help but feel the sarcasm in her words. "So, according to you, I have to replace it for what reason? I don't see any difference between my gate and those of other houses." Karen stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside for a moment before turning back to face me. "Some things can't be explained with simple logic, Malik. We have to maintain consistency, harmony in the neighborhood. A gate too simple could lower the overall value of this neighborhood." Her response made me even more frustrated. "So, the harmony of this neighborhood means everything has to be the same, right? Regardless of whether it's really necessary." Karen looked at me for a moment, then responded firmly. "Yes, Malik. This community needs to be consistent. If you can't accept that, you may need to think about living elsewhere." Her words felt like a cold splash of water hitting me. For the first time, I clearly realized that she wasn't just enforcing these rules to maintain the neighborhood's aesthetic, but was actually trying to force me out. Everything started to become clearer, and I could no longer keep my eyes closed. From then on, Karen's actions became more and more stringent. I received letters about other minor issues, from demanding I adjust the outdoor lights because the brightness was too much, to forcing me to trim the trees in my garden because they didn't meet the required size. Every time, I felt that Karen was finding ways to make things difficult for me. Every small issue became a big problem, and I began to realize that it wasn't just about the HOA regulations, but the subtle racial discrimination that was influencing the way she treated me. After weeks of continuous harassment from Karen, I felt I couldn't take it anymore. Unreasonable demands kept coming, from fines for vague reasons to reminders about things I didn't feel violated any rules. Every time I received a letter from the HOA, I felt like I was playing a ridiculous game of cat and mouse, and every time I faced Karen, I felt cornered. I began to wonder if I was her target just because I was the only black person in the neighborhood. I couldn't continue living with this fear and sense of oppression. At some point, I realized that if I wanted to find out the real reason behind Karen's actions, I needed to investigate more about her. I couldn't just wait for more vague letters and tense encounters. I decided to start looking into Karen, not through direct dialogue or HOA meetings, but by finding out what she was actually doing in this neighborhood. I began seeking input from the community. I attended HOA meetings, listened to other people's stories, and didn't hesitate to share my own. Not long after, I posted a message on Instagram where I shared the difficulties I was facing. I wrote about the fines for unjust reasons and how Karen kept making unreasonable demands that seemed to be targeting only me. I wrote in detail and transparently, hoping that the community would understand and help me find the truth behind it all. In the post, I didn't forget to ask a big question. Am I the target just because I'm the only black person in this neighborhood? Within just a few hours, my post attracted attention. Comments started pouring in, not only from neighbors, but from many people in the online community. Some people sympathized with me, sharing the issues they faced when dealing with Karen and the HOA. But there were also a few people who thought I was exaggerating, suggesting that I should just follow the HOA rules and not make a big deal out of it. Still, one particular comment caught my attention. It was from someone named Elijah. He wrote that he was a private investigator and lived in the nearby area. "I'm really sorry to hear what you've been going through. If you need help, I'm willing to assist without charge. I'll help you investigate Karen and what she's been doing," Elijah wrote in his comment. I felt a flicker of hope. After months of fighting alone, I could now find help from someone professional. I read through Elijah's profile and saw that he had experience in investigating complicated issues, and more importantly, he was also black, which made me feel more comfortable and willing to share. Immediately, I contacted Elijah through a message and shared the whole story. We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop near the neighborhood. When I met him, Elijah was a polite man with sharp eyes and a friendly smile. He listened as I told him about my encounters with Karen and my suspicion of racial discrimination behind her actions. Malik, I believe what you're saying isn't just a coincidence. I'll help you investigate, not just about Karen, but also about any relationships she might have with other parties in this neighborhood, Elijah said, his voice confident yet sincere. And I won't need you to pay me. This is my job, and I want to help. Elijah's promise made me feel much lighter. After so many times being pushed around with no one to stand up for me, now I had someone who could truly support me in this fight. I was no longer alone in this struggle. Elijah started gathering information about Karen. He reached out to her former neighbors, learned about her past, and also investigated her connections to major real estate companies in the area. The first clues began to surface, and I felt even more certain that my suspicions about Karen were not unfounded. This evidence not only shocked me, but also made me feel like I had been exploited from the very beginning. This entire neighborhood could become a target for the real estate projects that Karen and Greenfield Properties were orchestrating. I began to realize that her continuous imposition of regulations and fines wasn't about protecting the neighborhood, but was an attempt to force residents, particularly people like me, to give up their homes. This was a calculated scheme, a plan she had prepared long ago. From the small pieces of evidence, the truth about Karen and her relationship with Greenfield Properties gradually became clearer. Elijah not only obtained contracts and related documents, but also discovered internal emails between Karen and the executives of this real estate company. In one of them, she wrote, "We need to speed up the project and not let obstacles like Malik stand in the way. We can handle this with HOA rules to make them feel like they have no other choice." The story I was living wasn't just a personal struggle with a tyrannical HOA president, but a part of a bigger conspiracy. I was just a pawn in the power and money game of Karen and Greenfield Properties. Her relationship with this company had been established for a long time, and I was just one of the victims of the urban development plan they were pursuing. But as Elijah continued the investigation, an unexpected discovery occurred. He happened upon the fact that Karen wasn't only involved in real estate transactions, but also had a past related to smuggling. A source provided Elijah with crucial information about strange deals Karen was making with partners both inside and outside the country. These transactions were not legal and seemed to involve perfume smuggling, a highly valuable item traded illegally through unofficial channels. This evidence not only surprised me, but also became a key turning point. Along with the real estate documents, Elijah now discovered that Karen was a systematic smuggler, and what she was doing in this neighborhood was not just an abuse of power, but part of a larger criminal network. From here, everything became clear. Karen's attempts to push residents out of the neighborhood were not just to serve real estate projects, but were also part of her larger plan, a plan involving illegal transactions and severe corruption. With Elijah's help, we gathered enough evidence to bring Karen to light. The confidential documents, emails, and contracts we obtained proved that Karen was not just an HOA president abusing her power, but also a perfume smuggler involved in illegal activities related to trafficking and transporting goods across borders. These deals might not have been limited to just her, but could involve a broader criminal network. Moreover, Karen's racial discrimination became increasingly obvious. She had imposed strict regulations on me, the only black person in the neighborhood, with the clear goal of driving me out, while trying to push me into an unbearable situation. The unreasonable demands and repeated fines specifically targeted me, showing that racial discrimination was a major factor in her actions. With all of this evidence in hand, I could no longer stay silent. I decided to take decisive action to protect my rights, and also to ensure that Karen wouldn't continue harming this community. Elijah and I filed a lawsuit against Karen, taking the case to court and calling for intervention from the authorities. But that wasn't all. I knew that only making the information public could truly change the situation. We decided not only to file the lawsuit, but also to publicize the case on social media to inform the community about Karen's wrongdoings. I posted a detailed message on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, along with the evidence we had gathered. My post quickly attracted attention from the online community. People began sharing and commenting, not only expressing their outrage, but also condemning Karen's racist actions and corruption. This information quickly spread, letting the public know that someone in a position of power like Karen could abuse their authority to serve personal interests and engage in criminal activities. The community began sending letters to the authorities, demanding a thorough investigation into her actions. Once the information about Karen's actions became public, everything quickly went beyond her control. The police and relevant authorities couldn't just sit back in the face of the clear evidence Elijah and I had gathered. Within a few days, the investigation team stepped in, and their investigation didn't just focus on the perfume smuggling, but also expanded to other criminal activities related to Karen. Experts and agencies involved in smuggling began tracing Karen's connections to her partners, and her criminal network was slowly exposed. Karen was arrested and faced a series of serious charges, from perfume smuggling, abuse of power as an HOA president, to racial discrimination and making life difficult for neighborhood residents, particularly Black people like me. The undeniable evidence of her criminal activities along with Greenfield properties and the documents related to illegal transactions made it impossible for her to escape legal scrutiny. Soon after Karen was arrested, the news spread rapidly, not only in the neighborhood but also on social media. The online community erupted with outrage, strongly condemning her racial discrimination. People couldn't believe that someone in such a powerful position could exploit their power to harm those around them, especially Black residents in her neighborhood. Posts about the case flooded Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and various other forums. Thousands of people expressed their anger and demanded strict action against Karen. Some even shared their own stories of being oppressed by Karen, showing that she didn't just discriminate against me, but against many others in the neighborhood. Karen's actions were no longer a personal matter, but had become a larger social issue, exposing a form of corruption many never expected. When the case came to light, Karen not only faced charges in the courtroom, but also endured harsh criticism from the public. On social media, no one hid their anger at her actions over the years. Images, videos, and stories of her forcing residents to sell their homes, the unreasonable fines, and the other absurd demands she had made were widely shared. Karen, who thought she could stand above it all, now had to face the exposure of all the crimes she had committed. And while the law would process her according to the regulations, the public backlash on social media and from society was much heavier. Her long-standing racial discrimination had led many to question the fairness of modern society. She wasn't just a criminal in the eyes of the law, but also a symbol of the injustice that many people have and are still enduring. After Karen was arrested and the truth about her actions was exposed, I felt a great sense of relief. However, I also realized that the fight for justice didn't just end with my personal victory, but was also a great lesson about the values we must uphold in society: fairness, mutual respect, and fighting against all forms of discrimination. Looking back on the months that passed, I understand that it wasn't just me, but many others in this neighborhood, especially Black people, who had endured the discrimination and oppression that Karen caused. But through this struggle, we found our collective voice. We stood up for what was right and didn't let injustice continue to prevail. And most importantly, we proved that justice will always prevail as long as we persist and never give up. My story isn't just about one person fighting against an abuser of power, but it's also about a community standing up together to protect human values. And I want this story to go beyond just this point. So, if you also believe we need to speak up against discrimination and defend justice, don't forget to subscribe to my HOA Karen Files channel. This is where I will continue sharing stories about important social issues, from racial discrimination cases to struggles to protect the rights of the oppressed. We can change this world, starting from small stories like this. Thank you for watching and standing with me in the fight for a fairer society. Let's continue to act together, and don't forget to share our story with everyone. Subscribe now and join the community of those who refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice.